Hello again, everybody. It is time once more to impose my opinion upon the world. So let's go over the Awoken cards now. Awoken, in my opinion, is probably the second strongest faction. Like the Hellhorn, they're pretty generic in a lot of what they do. Some of their major mechanics are obviously the healing. They have a lot of healing spells. They have unit enhancements, regen, and spikes are their biggest mechanics. They also have a lot of card draw. They have the most card draw in the game, and they have quite a few powerful cards at all rarities. Uh, just like every other faction, though, they do have some duds. Let's start by looking at the Sentient. So, right, this is how we look at that. Now, apparently I have not unlocked Cultivating 3. I believe it has 200 HP though. Okay, so the Sentient herself is obviously a tank, and having a tank just immediately right from the get go is a big deal because that means when you're playing Sentient, you can focus your unit drafts on just picking good DPS and stuff, fill out other roles because your tank slot has already been fulfilled. Unfortunately, this does mean that when you're playing Awoken as a primary, Awoken and Thorn Hollow, which we'll get to later, become significantly worse because with Awoken as a primary, you're probably going to be wanting to put most of your healing spells onto Sentient herself. So I think Explosive is her strongest upgrade route. However, Spikes is also very good. Like these two are kind of interchangeable. They serve similar purposes, but there are some pretty major differences between them. Namely, Explosive is more adept at dealing single target damage, whereas Bristling is more adept at dealing AoE damage. I think Explosive is better because honestly, I value single target damage very highly, and Awoken has access to sweep units, which means that there's a very good chance we'll be able to cover our AoE situation anyway, so we wouldn't need the spikes. However, the spikes are a very solid choice as well, and they have a lot of their own merits, like the aforementioned AoE, and there's just a lot of nice combos with spikes as well. Now, the cultivating route here is eh. I wouldn't put more than 1 point into it. I would never pick this. Well, in general, I never pick this early game because the Awoken's biggest problem is lack of damage in the early game. That is their number one weakness, and taking cultivating early does not help with that at all. In fact, it causes a huge problem if you try to do this, and there's a very good chance you'll just die on the first or second floor. That's no good. So you take Bristling or Explosive. In the event that your deck, for whatever reason, really wants card draw like bad to increase its consistency, you can put 1 point into Cultivating, but that's as far as I would go. Sacrificing the damage you get from these other two for more card draw and HP usually just isn't worth it though. So let's move on to the cards. Sort by rarity, commons first. First up, we got Sting. So, Sting is a card that is produced by several other cards and one artifact. It's 0 mana, 5 damage for enemy unit, and you draw +1 next turn. Stings do have a couple artifacts that make them better. There's a locket that gives it +20 magic power, and the Thorn Casing, which gives it +15 magic power and piercing. Think stings are very powerful if you have to thorn casing because it lets you deal with the stuff like the steel wings and the shield dudes who sit in the front and have like 5, 10, 15 HP and a ton of armor. It gets through those quite nicely. However, stings by themselves are pretty solid too because of the card draw. It is a little bit delayed. However, the card advantage, well, you're not really getting card advantage from these things unless you add them to your hand as tokens, which there's quite a few ways to do. In that case, you are getting card advantage until the next time you draw the sting. But stings themselves, over the course of 2 turns, will never lose you cards. Having stings come out as tokens does provide a lot of powerful draw power, and the way these cards work makes them very, very good with incant triggers, but we'll talk about that later on in the Stygian video. And we'll probably be coming back to Sting when we get to some of the cards that create stings. Next up we got Vine Grasp. So this is just a really nice way to reach into backline. 3 damage is enough to kill backliners from the clipped. However, it's not enough to kill a lot of winged backliners. It is enough to kill some of the winged backliners, but not all of them. If you want to kill something like a Shade Wing with this, you need to upgrade it. But that's fine. Overall, like, Vine Grasp just provides some nice backline reach for 0 mana. It's a fine card. It's really solid if you pick it up early. However, if you already have backline damage figured out, there's not as much of a need for this. So I would take it early if you need backline reach. Otherwise, it's probably not worth the card slot. And if you do pick this up, make sure to upgrade this before you fight any of the winged, because if you don't have this upgrade by that point, it's not going to be able to kill Shade Wings anymore, and that can be a huge problem. Next up, we got Glimmer. Restores 2 health to all friendly units and deals 2 damage to all enemy units. We're mostly interested in the 2 damage to all enemy units here. However, the restore on this is nice. So this is a very powerful card in the early game. It starts to fall off a bit later, but like with other similar cards, this does retain its power into the late game if you just put a single +10 magic power upgrade on it. It's great in that case, because this just clears out the entire backline, which is very good to have. The restore health, especially with a magic power upgrade, is pretty relevant too a lot of the time. I do like this card quite a bit. It gets good work done. It deals with problem threats in the early game. It deals with problem threats in the late game, and the healing is just like a nice added bonus. Next up, we got Razor Sharp Edge. So when I started playing the game, I didn't care much for this card, but nowadays I do think this card is quite powerful for a few reasons. First off, it's flexible in the early game and the mid game too, actually. The human and clipped backliners will generally never have more than 1 or 2 HP. There are, of course, some exceptions, but that's generally the way it's going to be with those. Now, the -2 HP on this means that Razor Sharp Edge can kill those backline dudes. However, it only works on units that have 2 or less max HP. If they have more max HP than that, this won't work. Then there's the damage portion, which is very, very nice. Razor Sharp Edge provides some nice backline reach in the early game, and in the mid to late game, this becomes a very viable source of damage scaling. Stick this on your multi-strikers like your Animus of Will or Dante or maybe even Hornbreaker Prince, and it'll do some nice work for you. In one of my recent runs, I actually had this with holdover and minus cost, and I did that because I had Dante in the deck, and this provided all the damage scaling I needed to win the run. So I definitely think this card's very nice. It's very flexible, it's good at all stages of the game, and there's just a lot you can do with it. However, you don't want too many of these in your deck. One or two at most is as far as I would go, unless you have a really good reason to want this card for scaling purposes. Next up, we got Restoration Detonation. So, it restores 10 health to a friendly unit, deals damage to a enemy unit equal to 5 times the amount healed. Put magic power on this, it does scale up the amount of damage this can do. However, that's generally not the biggest selling point here. The biggest selling point is the fact that this can keep your frontline tanks alive and deal front-loaded damage to the problem tanky units at the same time. And that's pretty good. However, Restoration Detonation gets worse the more healing your deck has. You need a place to actually put the healing where it will heal something. Because if this doesn't restore any health, you're not doing any damage. This does restore health, though. If you get the full value out of it, it's very good. I would not take more than one of these per deck, though, because they don't stack very well, and they also don't stack very well with other forms of healing. So the more healing you have in the deck, the worse Restoration Detonation is. Next up, we got Restore. Restores 2 health and applies regen 1. This is the clan's starting card. Start with 5 of these in the deck. The Restore 2 health is okay. What we're really interested in, though, is the regen 1. The regen 1 actually means that Restore gives us a lot of help clearing bosses. The thing with regen is that the more regen you put on a guy, the better regen is. Because every stack of regen over the amount of damage a boss does is an extra turn against them. So if you can stack like 25 regen on your frontliner against Seraph or whoever, usually that's enough to just win the fight. Because the boss won't be able to grind through the regen stacks in time. And this is the primary way that Awoken based decks are going to be clearing bosses. This is your best scaling against them. Restore itself, of course, the values aren't very good, but what can you expect from the starter card? The fact that it can help clear bosses at all is a really big deal when you compare it to some of the other starter cards. So I do like Restore quite a bit. I think it's arguably the best clan starting card just because it actually scales well into the late game. Now let's look at Steel Enhancer. This card's mediocre. Enhancing unit with +3/+3. If you have a multi-striker, it's okay, but it's only +3 attack. You can stick this on your front line, but then it's only +3 health. This card just doesn't do a whole lot, and generally I don't like taking it. It's just too unimpactful. I would rather slot in a different card that's going to have a higher impact when I draw it. So generally I stay away from this one. Next up we got Wildwood Sap. Consume, apply regen 5 for 1 mana. Wildwood Sap is a very, very good option to deal with bosses. I already talked about regen with Restore, but this is the most efficient source of regen the Awoken have access to. Generally, when I'm fighting bosses in the late game, what my game plan looks like is stick maybe 2 wildwood saps on my frontliner, and then any restores I draw also go on them to keep the regen stacks high and even get them higher on the regen stacks if I draw enough restores. And usually that's enough to clear bosses even in a late game. So this is a really solid card. It's worth noting also that regen procs the explosive rejuvenate trigger on the sentient, so it's very nice for that. I do like this card quite a bit. I wouldn't take too many of them unless you're really confident you have the front load damage to get through the trash mobs. If you don't have the front load damage to get through the trash mobs, I wouldn't take too many of these. But if you're confident you do, then you can take 3, even 4 plus wildwood saps just to ensure that you're able to clear bosses. And the last common, let's take a look at Sharpen. 2 mana, you enhance a unit with +4 attack and then apply spikes 4 to it. It's okay. This is more of a card that you're looking to use with the Wrathful Hornbreaker Prince because the spikes will trigger his slay effect whenever a backline dude hits him. He will be taking a lot of damage though if you do this, and it does become much worse in the late game because it's only spikes 4. If it were spikes 5, it would be a significantly better card because that's how much HP a lot of the backliners in the late game have. Since it's only spikes 4 and there's no real way to get that number higher on the card, it's a lot worse in the late game. Early game, it's okay. I mean, the rate's not very good. If this were only 1 mana and it were like +3 attack and apply spikes 3, I think the card would be a lot better. However, because it's 2 mana and the effect doesn't scale well into the late game and it's kind of underwhelming in general, it doesn't help your frontline tanky guys survive, and it doesn't help your backline DPS dudes that much with DPS. Overall, I think this card just exists to be placed on the Wrathful Hornbreaker Prince. It doesn't make much sense anywhere else because it's kind of conflicted in what it wants to be doing. So that's all the common cards. Let's take a look at the uncommon cards now. First up, we got Ensnare. 0 mana, applies Rooted 1 to an enemy unit, and you draw +1 next turn. So Rooted means that the enemy unit won't advance to the next floor when the round ends. And it doesn't work on bosses. So this is just a really nice utility spell. The fact that it's 0 mana and it draws you 1 next turn makes it a almost free include in the deck. It's very good with incant triggers. It's very good for that general utility. It doesn't actually get you through the deck faster, much like Sting. However, I think the card's quite good just on its own. I take this one quite often, however, I don't take it super highly. I'll never pass up on an Ensnare, however, if there's a better card next to the Ensnare that I need more, I'll definitely take that instead, and I won't care too much about losing the Ensnare. Now let's look at Invigorating Solution. Consume, and you draw +3 cards next turn for 0. Unlike these other cards we've looked at so far, like Ensnare and Sting, this one does actually get you card advantage. And this is a very good card for helping you get through your deck faster to get to those key cards. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the sheer volume of draw power that the Awoken have access to means that they're a lot more inclined to take mana than other factions are. So Invigorating Solution is solid. It's another one of these cards like Ensnare that I'll never pass, but I might take something else instead. Now let's look at Preserve Thorns. Consume and add 3 stings to your hand for 0 mana. So this is very comparable to Invigorating Solution. They are super similar cards, however, there are some differences, and ultimately I think Preserve Thorns is the better card. Reason is you're getting all the stuff Invigorating Solution does, but you're also dealing 15 damage to some enemy units and triggering can't 4 times instead of once. And the 15 damage gets better with spell power. And stings have a lot of synergies too, which is great. The only downside is eventually you're going to have to draw stings from this again, and that's going to result in a net loss in card advantage. Oh, no, not a net loss in card advantage. It's going to kind of delay your draw for a turn later in the fight. And it's not that big of a deal. Usually, the first cycle through the deck is the most important, and having this kind of draw power for the first cycle through is fantastic. So I take this card quite highly. It has a ton of utility, it has a ton of combo potential with Stygian stuff, and I just think this is a very powerful card. Here we have Animus of Speed, 1 mana, 2 capacity, 25/3, and it has Quick. This card's okay. It's not the most impressive thing ever. It doesn't scale terribly well into the late game. The 3 HP does mean that for the most part we're going to have to get some sort of HP upgrade on this, so we can't go like multi-strike, or multi-strike plus an attack. Can't do that because then the Animus of Speed will just die to some BS. The card's okay. It's not my favorite. The quick on a unit like this tends to become irrelevant towards the mid game because the tanky frontliners are just way too tanky to care about the Animus of Speed. So in the mid to late game, this just ends up becoming a vanilla unit, which is the stats aren't very good on it. If we compare it to Horned Warrior, we're losing 1 health and 5 attack for the sake of quick. So the Animus is better than the Horned Warrior in the early game, but once we get towards the mid to late game, I would just rather have the HP and attack. Of course, these are 2 cards in different factions. It's just an easy comparison. It's the kind of unit where if I need a backline DPS and I'm being offered, say, Animus of Speed and Awoken Hollow, then yeah, I'll take the Animus. But I won't be super excited about it. Now, let's take a look at Animus of Will. 1 mana, 3 attack, 3 health, multi-strike 2. This is a very good backline DPS. The multi-strike 2 means that there's a ton of scaling potential on this. Much like the Animus of Speed, you do need to get some HP on it. Usually I'll end up doing something like Large Stone plus 10 attack on this, and it ends up working quite nicely. If I can't get the Large Stone on it because either I don't have access to a Large Stone or it just doesn't make sense with my capacity situation, then I'll get a Battle Stone and an Attack Stone on this, and that's fine too. Awoken does have the aforementioned Razor Sharp Edge, which is a very good source of damage scaling with the Animus of Will. In fact, it's enough damage scaling that it's even good in the super late game against Seraph, and like, it does scale fast enough to deal with those fights. So, in terms of Awoken cards, this is your premier backline DPS. It's the only real backline single target DPS you have access to that scales well. So it's a very valuable card because most of Awoken's other units are just super tanky boys or sweepy sweep boys, and those unfortunately do not provide much in the way of single target DPS, so they're not going to get you through Gilded Wings or Steel Wings or whatever. And here is Awoken Hollow. You summon it, it gains 60 max health, and it has Rejuvenate, gain +1/+1. It's 1 mana for 3 capacity, 15/15. It's okay. Honestly, I think the Thorned Hollow is a bit better, but we'll get to him later. This is a serviceable tank if you're not running Awoken as your primary, so you don't have access to Sentience. If you're running Awoken primary, however, I would not bother with this because you're probably going to be want to what is with my wording? You're probably going to want to be sticking most of your regen on the Sentience, so there's just not going to be room for the hollows in your deck. That being said, if you're not running Awoken primary, odds are that the hollows are going to be some of the best tanks you have access to because of their massive HP pool to dump resources into. With these guys, normally I'm looking at just pumping as much HP into them as possible so that I can focus all my damage into the backline. The Awoken Hollow, the +1/+1 isn't terribly meaningful, but it is something. The damage is rarely gonna make a difference, but it can. We're not here for damage though. We're here for the big butt on the dude, and the +1 HP is also not terribly meaningful, but it can come up. Now, here we have Edge Prior. Edge Prior is a mediocre card. I've never won with it because I never. Well, I'm not gonna say I never. Actually, that is true. I never take Edge Prior. I have had it as my starting rare on a few runs, and in those runs, the card has just been severely disappointing. The problem is that, okay, let's talk about this effect. What does this affect? Let's count how many cards this affects. Obviously, this works with Restore. It works with Restoration Detonation. It works with Glimmer. So there's 3. It does not work with Wildwood Sap, which is really unfortunate. Because Wildwood Sap does not heal, it just applies regen. So there's some cards. It works with this. It works with this, this, this. And I believe there's one more. Please tell me there's one more. There's not. Yeah, no, there's not. I don't think adaptive mutation counts, but we'll talk about adaptive mutation later. So the problem with this is we're spending 1 mana and 1 capacity on a floor to get this effect. The fact that it's 1 capacity could be good if you're running on 5 capacity, or you're running on 6 capacity, and on your floors you always have that 1 space put over. Then you can stack a couple upgrades on this guy just to get some more damage out, but the effect itself is super underwhelming. If you're just here for the effect, don't bother, because you have to spend 1 mana on the Edge Prior and draw the Edge Prior just to get him into play, and then when you cast your first healing spell, you get the 1 mana back, and you don't actually gain any net mana until the second healing spell. If you just have spare capacity in your lineup, then you could take the Edge Prior and stick the upgrades on it, like I said. However, keep in mind that on Cov 20 plus, the capacity situation gets a bit more complicated, so having cards like this is just not super consistent anymore. Now, let's look at Engraft. Restores 1 health, 1 mana, you gain 1 energy right now, and you draw +1 next turn. Now, this card is pretty decent, so I do take this one quite often. It's another one kind of like Ensnare and Invigorating Solution, where I will never skip when they come up. However, if there's other cards I need more, I'll just take those instead and won't be too upset to lose Engraft. It's good at triggering stuff like the Explosive Rejuvenate trigger. It's good at getting a little bit of extra juice out of your hollows if you're using that approach. If you have magic power, it turns into quite a bit more than 1 health restored. The gain 1 mana and draw +1 next turn is a big deal because that means this spell is effectively 0 mana baseline. However, you can upgrade it to cost 1 less, and when you do that, it becomes +1 mana baseline. And then if you do that and you get holdover on this, since it draws you +1 next turn, this is effectively increasing your max mana available every turn for the rest of the fight after you draw the card. So it's really nice there. It's just a really flexible card that has a lot of very minor effects, but the package as a whole results in a very good card. Now let's look at Husk Hermit. It's a 1 mana, 3/30 with sweep, and it takes up 2 capacity. This has a pretty sizable back end, 3 attack, and the sweep is the big selling point here. 3 attack is less than 5, so we need to put a attack upgrade on this. So let's say we put the attack stone on this, then it's a 13/30, then we stick quick on this, it's 13/30 quick. You stick it on the bottom, it clears out all the backliners every turn, and the 30 HP is enough to soak some damage from Gilded Wings. However, on higher covenants, you're going to need to stick something in front of the Husk Hermit in that case if you don't want it to die. Because 3 hits from a Gilded Wing will kill this. So keep that in mind. However, just the fact that this card has sweep makes it one of the better cards in the game, and it's definitely going a long way towards making Awoken a powerful faction. Now we have Pyre Shards. 1 mana, consume, apply spikes 4. So this is effectively half of Sharpen, which is better. It's better. You can stick this on your Hornbreaker Prince, which I guess is nice, but Spikes 4 outside that is a little bit underwhelming. You can stick it on an Awoken Hollow, and that can be alright, but mostly I think this is just here to make Hornbreaker Prince's Wrathful effect better. Once again, it's only Spikes 4. If it were Spikes 5, it would be considerably more powerful, but it's not. It only being Spikes 4 means that Shade Wings are going to get to hit your dude twice before going down, which means your dude's probably going to die, at which point the spikes will no longer be relevant because your dude is 6 feet under. But yeah, I really wish this were Spikes 5. The card will be way better. The way it is, it's just mediocre. The other sweep unit, Shattered Shell. This one's similar, except it's a 3/10 and it has Slay plus 2 attack. So we're sacrificing 10 health on our Husk Hermit to get this Slay trigger, and it's fine. It's fine. You are Oh, my bad. You are really looking for quick again. Well, God, I worded that poorly. You are once again really looking for quick on this, and having an attack upgrade is also necessary. The better options are going to be either the Battle Stone, the Large Stone, if you can afford to do that, or Multi Strike. All of those options have their pros and cons, but quick is kind of non-negotiable on these sweep guys. So Shattered Shell, if we put multi-strike on him, that means that he scales up faster and he just does more damage over time to frontliners. If you're going with that approach, you're probably going to want to put him behind a major tank, like sticking him in your primary lineup behind the sentient or whatever primary tank you're using, because he'll have no extra HP, so if something bad happens on the floor he's on, which is more likely if he's not on your primary floor, then he's toast. The other two options, the first one is the Battle Stone, which is +5/+10. This gives you 8 attack, which is enough to kill almost every backliner in the game. It does not kill absolvers, so if you're fighting Consumption Seraph, I would not go for that approach. Go either multi-strike. Well, multi-strike's not as good there either. I think if you're fighting Sap Seraph, you're gonna want the large stone or the attack stone maybe. But anyway, Battlestone is good for the extra HP. It keeps the capacity down, unlike large stone, and it gets your attack high enough to kill everything except for absolvers. Large stone obviously gives you the best stats. If you have to put the shower shell on a floor by itself, this is going to be your best option because 50 health is way, way better than 10 or 20 health. And the attack stone, like I mentioned, is a lot better if you're fighting Consumption Seraph because he likes to summon absolvers who have 10 HP, and absolvers can ruin. They can ruin you if you let them stick away or stick around for more than one turn. So having these kind of units in that case is even more important. But yeah, I do think this is a very good card. Take it highly and always, always, always look for quick on it. It's a very powerful combo and one that'll get you through a lot of bad situations. And now we got Thorned Hollow, the other Hollow. This one has similar stats to the Awoken Hollow, except it has lower base stats. This one only gains 40 max health on summon and only has 5 attack. However, on Rejuvenate, it gets spikes too, which I think is a lot better than the bonus from the damn it, the Awoken Hollow. Spikes too means that he'll be a lot better at dealing with backline. So if you don't find a Shattered Shell or a Husk Hermit, the Thorn Hollow can be another solution to deal with backline dudes. However, if you're in a situation where you want a hollow at all, you're probably going to take the first one you see, so comparing the two probably isn't that relevant. Unless they both come up, then generally it depends. If I just want a big tanky dude stick in front and I don't care about AoE, I'll take the Awoken Hollow. If I don't have any good ways to deal with backline stuff, and I need something to supplement that as well, I'll take the Thorned Hollow, and he can fill both roles. Just like with the Awoken Hollow, you're looking for max HP upgrades on this guy, or just HP upgrades. Those are very good here. Now we got Wildwood Custodian. I really dislike this card. It's Similar to the Edge Prior, it's just a one capacity dude. It has very, very low stats and draws you +1 each turn. This effect, in my opinion, is actually worse than Edge Prior because for two reasons. First, Awoken already has a lot of card draw, so this isn't super good. Second, you have to wait 2 turns to actually get any card advantage off this. You play the Wildwood Custodian, then you wait a turn, you draw a card at the start of your next turn. But at that point, you haven't gained any card advantage because you had to draw the edge or the Wildwood Custodian. So you're now net neutral in cards, and it's not until the turn after that you get your first bit of card advantage. Problem is finding places to fit the Wildwood Custodian in, having to pick the Wildwood Custodian over other better uncommon cards, and taking the Wildwood Custodian and then having to put upgrades on it to prevent it from dying and make it useful outside the card draw. If you're certain you'll have spare capacity on your main floor, you can take this similarly to Edge Prior and stick some attack upgrades on it just to supplement your DPS a bit. Overall, though, not terribly impressive. Now we got Bramble Lash. Bramble Lash is mediocre in most cases, however, it's very, very good if you're running the Thorn Sentient. In that case, this is strong enough to one-shot enemy frontliners every time. In fact, it's so strong that you're going to want to put like holdover on it. In other cases, it's just okay. So if you're running Thorn Sentient, very, very good card. If you're not running Thorn Sentient, not that great. Now we got Focus Growth, stores 25 health, draws +2 next turn for 1 mana. You're going to want to reduce the cost on this, but overall I think the card's quite nice. It gives you a really large injection of health to keep your Sentient or your Hollows nice and healthy. And if you don't need the 25 HP, you can either not play it, or you can play it anyway to trigger any Rejuvenate triggers and draw +2 next turn. +2 means that you're actually getting net card advantage off this of 1. So that's nice. Gets you through your deck faster, provides a pretty sizable chunk of health to keep you in the fight. Now we got Pyrogrow, so this one is it's a thing that exists, and how good it is depends on the average cost of your deck. If the average cost of your deck is 2, then Pyrogrow is just okay. If the average cost of your deck is higher than 2 somehow, but that's pretty much never the case. If that is the case, I have no idea how you got there. Anyway, Pyro's good then. If it's lower than 2, Pyro's bad. You can stick upgrades on Pyro, or you could just stick upgrades on other spells that do more useful things to reduce their cost instead, and then you don't have to worry about Pyro. Really, only times I would bother with this are A, in a volatile gauge deck, it's okay there. B, Consumption Seraph, you can use it to cover yourself from his consumption effect, but it's actually no, because the blights he puts in you can and usually do want to play anyway, never mind. Overall, I don't think Pyrogrow is very good, but I don't know how you would make it better. I guess no, making it cost less would just make it too good probably, because that would screw the numbers up. Having some sort of very minor extra effect on this would make it a lot better in my opinion. Now we got Restoring Retreat, which I've somehow never won with. It's probably because Awoken's powerful enough that they don't need to rely on ascend, descend stuff. But descending a unit is much worse, in my opinion, than ascending a unit most of the time. The reason Hidden Passage is so good is because A, it costs 1 mana, and B, ascending units to stack them onto a floor is much better than descending because the economics just work out better. Additionally, when you descend units on the enemy side, it causes them to kind of stack up on a floor, and that can be problematic. Whereas with ascend, you can use it early in the fight to spread the enemies out more. Descending them stacks them up taller. I want my enemy packs to be thin, not thick. So that makes this card quite a bit worse. It also costs more. Um, there's a Melting Remnant card that's very similar to this that we'll talk about later. The 10 HP is kind of net neutral here because if you're using it on a friendly unit, it's fine. You can use it on your tank on the bottom floor just to restore HP to them without descending them because there's nothing under there. But if you do use this on an enemy unit, they get the HP as well. So that's kind of neutral. This card's not the greatest. It is okay, but there's just way better things you can be doing with Awoken than this. Now the last uncommon is Awake. Restore 30 health and apply regen 4. 30 health is quite a big number, and regen 4 is quite a bit of regen. This is a lot of HP to be restoring. And it's also a pretty decent card. It is very expensive. If you're running this, you need something to get the cost down. So the 30 health is good during the trash phase of the fight. It's good there because it's going to keep your dude alive right now. Whereas the regen portion is very good during the boss phase of the fight because it's going to keep your dude alive longer over the course of the boss fight. So this card is good at pretty much every point during the fight. The only time it's not good is if you're very early in the fight. If you're very early in the fight and you got your sentient in front, but they're already max HP, paying this much mana to get 30 health and regen 4 is not worth it. However, if you get 2 -1 upgrades on it, then it probably is worth it just for regen anyway. So I think this card is pretty solid, but you definitely need to find a way to get the cost down. Finally, we got our rare cards. Awoken's Rail Spike. This card's nuts. I mean, I shouldn't have to explain why this is so good, but just look at it. X cost consume. You draw X. Enhance all cards drawn this way with -2. It is worth noting that you are going to brick with this a little bit most of the time, because you're going to draw your dead weights or other blights or just zero cost stuff, but that's fine. You're still drawing X cards, and you're still able to play those cards on the turn because they cost 2 less. That's fantastic. This gets you to the key pieces in your deck faster. It's a great way to dump excess mana. Just the fact that it churns through your deck so fast means that your early parts of fights are going to be way easier to deal with since you're getting to your important pieces faster, you're playing them out cheaper so you can get them set up faster and start worrying about the later stages of the fight sooner. Very good card, probably the best rail spike. Of course, there is not a ton of competition. Now we got Unleash the Wildwood. 0 mana restores friendly units full health. This is okay. It's okay during the trash phases of fight, but much like Awake, it's gonna do nothing if your guys are full HP already, obviously. But if it's early in the fight and you've just played like a Thorned Hollow or an Awoken Hollow, then this card is quite good. But if you already got your guys nice and healthy, this card kind of blows because it does nothing besides restoring this HP. Even Rejuvenate applies a stack of regen, which can help during the later stages of fights. I'm not saying this card's bad, I'm just saying that the card's not as good as it looks. It's better on paper than in practice. Now we got Channel Song. Oh god, Channel Song. Consumes. It costs 1. Draw a unit, enhance it with +20/+20, and 0 cost. I think that this is the pinnacle of good on paper, bad in practice. I can't recall a single time I've taken Channel Song and been pleased with it. Every single time the card is just disappointing. Because usually, if I'm taking Channel Song, the most I can expect from it is to get souped up Train Stewards. Because of the way that unit draws work in the game, it makes getting real units off Channel Song kind of a task. It makes it much less likely, and overall, I just don't know if the card's worth a card slot. Because usually when you're being offered Channel Song, it's in a rare draft, and rare cards are pretty powerful. So do you really want to take Channel Song over something like Awoken Rail Spike or Spreading Spores or whatever? Most of the time, no. The card is fine in a vacuum, but the opportunity cost is just so high on this one. I used to take the card a lot, now I just don't care about it because it's too disappointing too often. Next up we got Shard Chandler. Unlike the other two Chandlers, the Edge Prior and the Wildwood Custodian, the Shard Channeler is actually worthwhile if you're running the Thorn Sentience. It's pretty good there because effectively doubling the damage of your Thorn Sentience immediately is very, very good. Unlike the other two Chandlers, this one does provide immediate value. You don't have to wait some unreasonable number of turns to see returns on this. You see the returns immediately. With the Thorned Sentience, the damage you get on this is actually quite respectable. So you can stick them in the back. With the other two, I mentioned that you need to only take them if you have spare space. If you're running Thorn Sentient, however, and Shard Chandler shows up, I think it's worth it to make space for him. It's really worth it to fit him into the lineup, get some upgrades on him to keep him healthy, and to give him some of his own attack, just so that he's helping out a bit more with the DPS. I think this one's actually quite a good card, but only with the Thorn Sentience. In other builds like Explosive Sentient, or if you're not running Sentient at all, this is about as good as the other two guys. But in that one case, this is a very good card. Otherwise, though, stay away. Vine Mother. Okay. 1 mana, 0/20. End of each turn, you add a sting to your hand. So this is another one of the cards that produces sting tokens. She's very good with Stygian and Ganstaff. She gets you effective card advantage over time as well as damage. The fact that the spike or the stings have synergy with other artifacts as well makes this a bit better. The baseline stats aren't the greatest. It's kind of comparable to the Chandlers, really, except it has more HP and it takes up more space. However, I think the effect of the stings is quite a bit better than what you're getting off the Chandlers. However, it's not that impressive if you're not running Stygian. If you are running Stygian and you have any amount of incant stuff going on, the Vine Mother becomes a very impressive card, and it turns into a pretty good synergy engine because the issue with the what am I doing? Oh no. The issue with the Edge Prior is he's only getting you cards and it takes him too long to do so. The Vine Mother is isn't only getting you cards. She's also doing a little bit of supplemental damage to the front line and triggering incant. That being said though, if you're not running Stygian, this card is probably just too mediocre to take. Wildwood Tome. 1 mana, consume, apply quick. I don't know about Wildwood Tome. It can be very good, but it can also be completely useless. The thing with this card is when you want it, you'll know you want it. But the fact that there's an upgrade that gives quick as well makes the tome significantly worse because for most units we can hopefully just find the upgrade for quick, but that's not always the case. The fact that Awoken has sweepers does make this a lot better because if you can't find the quick upgrade for your sweepers, you can find Wildwood's Home instead if you're lucky and stick this on them, though that's quite a bit less consistent because if you draw the tome before the sweeper, then both cards suddenly become useless, and that's very unfortunate. You can stick permafrost on the tome to prevent that from happening, but then if you draw the sweeper first, you have to wait for the tome to show up for it to be any good. But just the fact that this is an option at all is pretty solid. The other option is if you're trying to stick this on your champion. Like, let's say you're running a Monstrous Penumbra or Hornbreaker Prince is Reaper Brawler combination form. Then this can be quite good because it can get because champions like that do have enough single target DPS to tear through an enemy front line before they get to attack with quick. That can be quite nice too. So you'll know when you want this card. Only take it when you want it, but for the most part, you'll know when the card's going to be good. Adaptive Mutation. Okay, I've never won with this card, and I don't think the card's very good. It's more of a combo meme card. The idea is that you're comboing this with like your Animus of Will, like you're gonna get a large stone on your Animus, then you're gonna give it plus 25 HP, and then you're gonna stick the adaptive mutation on it. And that can be pretty nice, but it's just a bit too inconsistent and it's too many steps. There's just way more reliable ways to get this done. I think the card's cool. I just don't think the card's very useful in a practical sense. Spreading spores, 1 moment. That's what might throw a bit there. It's getting a bit tough talking for so long. Anyway, spreading spores applies regen 2 and spikes 2, adds a copy to your discard pile. Like I mentioned, the more regen you have, the better regen gets. What spreading spores does is it gives you a way to kill the boss. And that's it. If you already have a reliable way to deal with bosses, spraying spores isn't necessary. However, if you don't, it is a pretty nice option because you can stick some combination of cost reduction and double stack and hold hold over on this. However, I do not recommend hold over because I think that's kind of overkill and it'll dilute your deck too much. The power of this card is that it's going to be pretty non-present your first cycle through the deck, where you're trying to set up your front-loaded damage and defensive packages. However, later on in the fight, you get more and more of them as you start getting more and more concerned about dealing with the boss. So it's not very present in the deck when you don't need it, but when you do need it, it's there all the time. And I think that makes the card quite good. Spraying Spores alone with some upgrades stuck onto it is one of the better ways to ensure that you're going to be able to kill the boss. And for that reason, I think the card's quite good. However, if you've already got a reliable way to kill bosses set up, you don't need Spreading Spores, so you might want to consider taking something else instead. Wilting Sapwood, our last Awoken unit. 2 mana for a 5/30. It takes up 3 capacity and it has Revenge, gain 1 energy. I don't really understand this card. I feel like there's some places this has to be good, but I've not found those places yet. Every time I take it, it's just disappointing. Because if you're looking for a tank, the Hollows or the Sentient herself are just going to provide better options. If you're not looking for a tank, you don't want this because that's the only thing it's good at. It has to get hits, produce the energy. I just haven't found a situation where the extra upfront costs on it and the loss in effective HP is worth it on my frontliner with Woken. I don't think the card's bad in a vacuum. If this belonged to some other faction, I'm sure it would be very, very good. But the fact that the Awoken have access to Awoken Hollow and Thorned Hollow makes this card considerably worse. Finally, we got Cycle of Life. 3 mana, enhance a unit with plus 10 HP, and apply spikes 4. This is another way of. This one spikes 4 too. God, I wish just one of these. If any of them, this one, because this is the most expensive one, the rare one. It's supposed to be the coolest and the most flashy. But I just wish any of these cards that gave spikes 5. They all give spikes 4. Cycle of Life is okay. If you're running like a volatile gauge build, it's pretty decent. But for 3 mana, this effect isn't that good. The spikes 4 isn't enough to kill Shade Wings once again. So they're just going to shred through your dudes. And once again, I think this is more of a thing for the Hornbreaker Prince. I just don't think the 3 mana is worth it in general, though. You need to stick some cost reduction upgrades on this because it's just so expensive. The plus 10 max HP is nice, and it's good in the early game, but in the late game, it's not going to make a huge difference most of the time. The card just takes a bit too much work to make good. As a result, the card itself is not that great. It's serviceable, but you can do much better. Once again, if this were Spikes 5, and please, devs, please, I know you're not watching this video, but if on the off chance you watch this video, please make this Spikes 5. Like, that's all I want. Just make one of these Spikes 5. This whole strat with the Hornbreaker Prince and the spikes isn't very good, and these spikes cards are not very good elsewhere. But if they were spikes 5, they still wouldn't be very good. But they'd at least be a little bit better. So please, please make this spikes 5. I don't care if you nerf something else from Devo. Like, you can nerf Preserve Thorns or Engraft or whatever. I don't care. But I just want spikes 5 on one card. That would be very, very nice. Anyway, that's all the Awoken cards. I think Awoken is a very strong faction. I think they're the second strongest and most consistent in the game, behind only Stygian, who we will talk about next time. So I'll see you guys then.